At 18, I had the world ahead of me. At least that's what I believed. The future felt like an open road, a journey waiting to be claimed. I was fresh out of high school in Phoenix, Arizona, brimming with the kind of youthful arrogance that only someone with so little experience could possess. It wasn't so much that I was certain of what I wanted, but more that I was desperate to prove to everyone, especially myself, that I was in control. That was when I decided to get my first tattoo. It wasn't some grand life decision, and it certainly wasn't rooted in any profound meaning. It was impulsive, a rebellion against the expectations that had been placed on me for so long. I wanted to carve something into my skin, something permanent that would serve as a testament to my independence, to the person I was trying to become. It was small, nothing more than a subtle symbol etched on the inside of my forearm. In the moment, I thought it was a symbol of freedom, a declaration that I was no longer the same person who had gone through years of high school under the watchful eyes of teachers, parents, and society. It felt like my first true act of autonomy. I thought I was marking my own path. But I didn't realize that the very act of rebellion that I thought was my own choice would soon lead to something far deeper, something I wasn't ready for. As I walked out of that tattoo shop, my skin now marked, I felt something shift within me, but I couldn't place it. That tattoo was the beginning of something, a thread that would tie me to a world I didn't even know existed, a world where the choices I made, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, would echo far beyond what I could imagine. What seemed like simple rebellion became a doorway to something much more profound. Over the next few years, my body became a canvas. 1 to 2 turned into 2, then 5, until it seemed like every inch of my skin told a story. There was a phoenix on my chest, an emblem of resilience after a devastating breakup, a delicate cross on my wrist in memory of my grandmother, who had never missed a Sunday service in her life. They were symbols, yes, but they were also more than that. Some were reminders of pain, others of strength, and a few were simply cool designs I had picked out on a whim. But none of them ever carried the weight of true meaning, not in my eyes. I wasn't a bad person. I worked hard, paid my bills, kept my head down, and avoided trouble. I had my faults, of course. Who doesn't? I drank with friends. I told white lies to keep the peace, but I lived my life according to my own rules. My faith, though, was something I had abandoned long ago. I wasn't the kind of person who needed religion anymore. I had been dragged to church by my mother when I was a child, but as I grew older, I stopped believing in anything higher than myself. Heaven and hell? They seemed like distant concepts, myths that no longer applied to me. If there was a God, he felt like little more than a vague presence, something far removed from my everyday life. But one night, everything changed. It was supposed to be like any other night, just another weekend getaway in Las Vegas with friends. A few drinks, a little karaoke, maybe some bad decisions, and a lot of laughter echoing through the neon-lit streets. Nothing unusual, nothing out of the ordinary. I was alive, free, untouchable, or so I thought. I was doing exactly what I wanted, following my own path. But fate has a way of tearing illusions apart when you least expect it. I can still remember the moment everything changed. It was terrifyingly clear. 1 second, I was laughing at a joke, lost in the mundane noise of night, and the next, a sharp, searing pain shot through my chest. It was as if something invisible had reached inside me and squeezed my heart. My knees buckled, and the world started to spin wildly out of control. I collapsed, gasping for air, my friends' voices fading into a distant hum. I felt myself slipping, the ground beneath me disappearing, and then nothing. But I wasn't gone. Not yet. Somehow, I was still there, floating above my body, detached but painfully aware of everything. I watched as my friends screamed my name, their faces contorted with panic. Someone called 911. A stranger tried to perform CPR, but none of it mattered. Because I wasn't there anymore. I had left. At first, there was only darkness. It wasn't the kind of darkness you feel when the lights go out. No, this was something different. A living void that pulsed with something ancient and unknowable. I didn't feel pain, but I felt watched. An overwhelming sense of being observed flooded me, as though I were no longer alone. Something was there in the dark with me, a presence, cold and silent, tracking my every breath, though I wasn't breathing anymore. And then the whispers came. They didn't come from outside of me, but from within the darkness itself. Words I couldn't understand, but somehow felt deep in my bones. They were not in a language I knew, yet I felt their meaning reverberate through me. You are marked. The words didn't come from me. They didn't come from anyone I knew. They came from the darkness itself, as if it had a voice, a power. The words echoed, crashing into the silence like a thunderclap, shaking my very being. I wanted to scream, to run, but I had no voice, no body. I was nothing but a soul drifting in a place beyond human comprehension. The shadows moved. They swirled around me, shapes twisted and malformed, circling me like predators closing in on prey. They knew me, every secret, every regret, every tattoo on my skin. They weren't just watching, they were waiting. And just as I felt the cold begin to seep into my very essence, something unimaginable happened. A light, a brilliant, blinding light. It wasn't soft. It wasn't warm. It tore through the darkness like a blade cutting through paper, and the shadows recoiled, shrieking without sound. I could feel the light as it came closer, pulling everything dark and sinister into its radiant force. And then, in the center of that light, I felt him, Jesus Christ, not as a distant figure I'd seen in stained glass windows, but as a presence, overwhelming, full of peace, power, and truth. Truth so profound that it shattered every wall I had built around my heart. In that light, all the shame, the regrets, the pain of every reckless choice, every forgotten prayer, every tattoo that had meant nothing, all of it lay bare before him. And then I saw them again, the tattoos. Only now they weren't just ink. They glowed faintly, each one carrying a weight I hadn't understood before. Some of them were shields, protective, defensive. Others were open doors, and I suddenly understood that I had unknowingly walked through them. Before I could speak, before I could ask why, I heard his voice, steady and unwavering, speak directly to my soul. You have been marked, but this is not the end. If this story speaks to you, if it resonates with something deep inside you, I want to invite you to be part of something bigger. We are building a community here, a space where we can share, grow, and support each other on this journey. Take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your name and city. Imagine hearing your name shared with thousands of people in the next video. It's like a moment of fame, a chance to be seen and heard. Together, we can make a difference. Join our community, and let's continue this. The world around me came crashing back in all at once, harsh and unforgiving. I was no longer suspended in that divine light, no longer floating above my body. I was back, and the sterile white walls of the hospital room were the first thing I saw as I came to. The bright fluorescent lights burned my eyes, too intense, too real. It was as if my senses had forgotten how to interpret the physical world, how to feel in the way I once had. The beeping of machines filled the room, frantic and repetitive, each sound amplifying reality I had just returned to. Nurses' voices echoed through the space, muffled and distant, the shuffle of shoes on cold tile floors. But none of it mattered, not in the way it used to. I had been somewhere else, somewhere beyond the confines of this place. I had seen something that no medical device could measure, no doctor could explain. And the worst part? I wasn't sure anyone would believe me if I tried to explain it. I turned my head slowly, my muscles weak, each movement an effort. My body felt foreign to me, as if I were in a shell that didn't quite fit. That's when I saw it. My arm, lying still against the hospital sheets, covered with tattoos I had once worn with pride. Now they felt heavy, burdensome. The phoenix on my chest, which had once symbolized resilience, felt like a lie. The cross on my wrist, once a memory of my grandmother's unwavering faith, now felt like a reminder of something I couldn't escape. They all meant something more than I had ever understood, more than I was willing to admit. But what terrified me most wasn't the ink itself. It was a feeling that lingered beneath my skin, a coldness, like unseen fingers still gripping at my spirit, refusing to let go. That moment in the darkness I had left behind, but which had not let go of me, was not over. It had followed me. You are marked. The words echoed in my mind, louder now than they had been in that void. Every tattoo, every symbol on my body burned with new meaning. I tried to shake the thought, to focus on the room around me, but the weight of it was inescapable. The nurse appeared by my side, her eyes wide with cautious relief. "You're awake," she said softly, as though speaking too loudly would pull me back into that place I had just escaped. "Can you hear me?" I nodded, but no words came. My voice wouldn't work. I could only grip the thin blanket over my chest, needing something real to hold on to. The doctor appeared shortly after, his voice calm, professional. But I could hear the disbelief in his tone. "You were gone for 3 minutes," he said, reading from a chart. "Flat line, no heartbeat." His gaze met mine. "And then you just came back. Like nothing happened." Nothing happened. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, but I couldn't find the words. Something had happened. Something that went far beyond what could be explained by any medical term or procedure. I had left my body. I had faced something far greater than I could understand. They asked me routine questions. Name, date of birth, the president's name. I answered them automatically, but my thoughts were elsewhere, caught between two worlds. How could I explain to them that I had seen the other side, that I had been marked by something beyond human comprehension? I could still feel it, that coldness, that presence watching me. The weight of it all pressed down on me as I lay there in the sterile hospital bed. I wasn't afraid of dying anymore, but I was terrified of what might still be following me. As the days passed, I returned to my small apartment in San Diego. The walls felt closer now, the air too heavy. It was as though the shadows from that void had followed me back, waiting for the right moment to slip through the cracks. I avoided mirrors, afraid to see the tattoos shimmer on my skin. Each line, each curve seemed to hum an energy I couldn't understand. The ink that had once felt like an expression of freedom now felt like an open door to something far darker. And the whispers, they followed me. It started with small things. The feeling of being watched, even when I was alone. The cold air brushing against my neck when the windows were closed. At night, sleep became impossible. The dreams weren't dreams. They were memories twisted by something darker. Every time I closed my eyes, I found myself back in that void, surrounded by shadows. "You are marked." It was like a chant, a constant reminder that I had opened doors I didn't know how to close. The whispers followed me into the waking world. A week after I left the hospital, I realized I wasn't alone. Not truly. I was sitting in my apartment, tracing the lines of the phoenix on my chest, trying to remember why I had gotten it in the first place. That's when it happened. The temperature in the room dropped. Subtle at first, then biting cold. The shadows on the wall seemed to stretch too far, and the air grew heavier. Then I heard it, a voice, not from outside, but from behind me. "It belongs to us now." I spun around, heart hammering, but there was nothing there. No figure, no shape, just an oppressive emptiness pressing against my chest. It wasn't my imagination. Whatever I had touched in that place hadn't forgotten me. It had followed me, and I knew it wasn't going to let go. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I prayed, not the half-hearted prayers of my childhood, not the empty words I had muttered in times of hardship. This was different, desperate, raw. I dropped to my knees, the shadows shifting around me, and whispered, "God, if you're real, if you're still listening, help me, please." The silence was deafening. But then, just before I collapsed into sleep, I felt it, a warmth spreading from my chest outward, chasing away the cold. For the first time in days, a light flickered deep within me. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew this. There was a battle ahead, one I wasn't prepared for, and it was only just beginning. The following days were a blur. I walked through life as though I were drifting in and out of a dream, disconnected from everything that once felt real. The feeling of the shadows pressing against me never left. It lingered in the air, suffocating me, a constant reminder that something unseen was following me. I couldn't shake the sensation that I was being watched, even when I was alone. The whispers, faint but persistent, filled the silence, weaving around me like an uninvited presence that had come to stay. I had hoped that after a few days, the heaviness would fade, that the strange visions and unsettling cold would disappear. But they didn't. They only grew stronger. One night, after another restless evening of tossing and turning, I finally gave into the exhaustion that had built up inside me. I closed my eyes, hoping for some respite, but instead of peace, I found myself in the darkness once again. But this time, something was different. I was no longer floating in the vast emptiness, detached from the world of the living. This time, I was standing, my feet firmly planted on the ground, though I couldn't tell where. I looked around, and the world I saw was nothing like the one I had left behind. It was a barren desert. The sky stretched above me like a dark canvas, burning with an eerie, lightless fire. The ground beneath my feet cracked with each step I took, as though the earth itself was alive, angry and fractured. I felt the weight of the air pressing down on me, each breath sharp and cold, as if the very atmosphere was trying to suffocate me. And in the distance, I saw them, figures moving slowly across the barren landscape, not quite human, but not quite shadows either. They seemed to glide, their eyes hollow, endless. There was no sound, but their presence was deafening, and I knew without a doubt that they were waiting for me. A chill ran down my spine as they came closer, their marks burning through the darkness, symbols twisted and jagged, pulsing with an energy that felt ancient, alive. I tried to move, to run, but my body wouldn't obey. It was as if the sand beneath my feet had turned to quicksand, pulling me deeper with every desperate attempt to escape. The tattoos on my skin burned, the designs I had once worn so proudly now lighting up with searing heat, reaching deep into my bones. I cried out, but no sound escaped. The figures moved closer, their hollow eyes fixated on me, their intent clear. They knew me. They knew everything about me. Every mark on my skin, every mistake I had ever made, every choice, every regret. But just as I felt the darkness close in, something happened. A burst of light, so bright, so pure, that it cut through the emptiness like a knife through paper. The figures recoiled, shrinking away from the brilliance. And there, standing in the center of that light, was him, Jesus. Not as a distant figure I had seen in paintings or stained glass windows, but as a living, breathing presence of peace, power, and truth. His gaze was not filled with judgment, but with something deeper, understanding, compassion, and love. His hand reached out, not in condemnation, but in invitation. The chains that had bound me, chains I had never even realized were there, shattered in an instant. And as the light consumed everything, the figures, the darkness, everything I had feared disappeared. I woke up gasping for air, drenched in sweat, my heart racing. The hospital room was gone, replaced by the familiar walls of my apartment. But the feeling of peace remained, lingering like a warm light inside me. It was as if something had shifted, like a battle had been fought and won in the spiritual realm, and I had been caught in the crossfire. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew this. I had been marked, and I was no longer the same person who had walked into that tattoo shop all those years ago. The tattoos I had worn as symbols of rebellion, of independence, now carried a weight far beyond what I could comprehend. I traced my fingers over the tattoos on my arms, the serpent on my forearm, the cross on my wrist, the phoenix on my chest. They weren't just designs anymore. They were doors, invitations to something much greater than I had ever imagined. But with those doors came responsibility. I had been marked for a reason, and now it was time to understand why. The days after my awakening were filled with confusion. My life had never felt so divided. The world around me continued as it always had, routine, predictable, and unchanged, but I was no longer the same. The tattoos on my skin, once just marks of rebellion, now felt like chains, dragging me back to a place I couldn't escape. Every step I took, I felt their weight. They weren't just ink anymore. They were burdens, symbols of a battle I hadn't yet fully understood. I tried to go about my daily life, to ignore the whispers that seemed to follow me. But no matter how hard I tried, the cold presence never left. It lingered in the corners of my mind, in the shadows of my thoughts. There was something darker out there, something I had touched, something that was now trying to claim me. The nightmares continued. Each night, I found myself back in that vast desert, surrounded by shadows that closed in on me, suffocating me. The figures with their hollow eyes and marks, those same marks that now burn beneath my skin. I could feel them calling to me, pulling me toward them, urging me to join them in their darkness. It wasn't just a dream anymore. It was real. I could feel the weight of it in my soul. The enemy was closing in, but it wasn't just fear that gripped me. It was a deep, unsettling understanding. I had been marked, and the marks on my skin, whether I wanted to acknowledge them or not, were the key. They were doors, gates that had been opened, letting something in, something dark. I spent hours in prayer, asking for guidance, for help, but the shadows never relented. They whispered to me in the quiet moments, in the stillness between breaths. "You belong to us." Those words echoed in my mind, louder with each passing day. The more I tried to ignore them, the stronger they became. The darkness had a way of seeping into every corner of my life, tainting everything it touched. And yet, something within me refused to give in. Something inside me was awakening, stirring with a strength I hadn't known I possessed. I wasn't going to be claimed, not without a fight. One night, as I lay in bed, unable to sleep, I decided to take action. I couldn't keep running from this. I had to face it. I had to confront whatever had been unleashed, whatever had attached itself to me. I knelt beside my bed, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadows were thick in the room, pressing in on me from all sides. I closed my eyes and whispered the words I hadn't said in years. "God, help me, please." And then, as if in response, a warmth spread from my chest, wrapping around me like a protective blanket. The coldness in the room began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of peace I hadn't felt in so long. I wasn't alone anymore. I could feel his presence, strong and comforting, surrounding me. It was then that I understood. This battle, this war for my soul, it wasn't mine to fight alone. I had been marked for a purpose, and it was time to embrace it. But I couldn't do it by myself. I needed help. I needed the strength that only he could provide. As the warmth continued to fill me, the shadows receded, leaving behind only stillness. The whispers stopped. The weight that had pressed on my chest, suffocating me, was gone. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe again. But this peace wasn't permanent. I knew the darkness would return. The battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. And this time, I would be ready. If this story resonates with you, if you feel the weight of it, take a moment to like this video and leave a comment with your name and city. In the next video, we'll send out a special shout out to those who comment. Imagine hearing your name shared with thousands of people, your moment of light in this growing community. After the prayer, things began to shift in a way I couldn't explain. The heaviness that had settled over me seemed to lift, if only for a moment, but it was enough. A glimmer of hope, a brief reprieve from the weight that had threatened to crush me. The whispers, though still faint, were quieter. The darkness that had once followed me like a shadow seemed to retreat, if only a little. But I knew it wasn't over. I knew that whatever had followed me into this world, whatever I had opened the door to, was not going to give up that easily. I had to face it. But facing it wasn't something I could do alone. I needed guidance, strength, and the courage to continue walking this path, even if it scared me. The mark on my skin, the very thing I had once thought was a symbol of rebellion, was now my responsibility. It had become a calling, a force far greater than I had ever understood. In the days that followed, I started researching, looking into the meanings behind the symbols on my skin, trying to make sense of the designs I had once worn with such pride. What I found terrified me. The serpent on my forearm, the one I had thought was a cool design, was an ancient symbol, one tied to fear, temptation, and darkness. The geometric patterns on my ribs weren't random either. They were used in occult practices, rituals designed to invite forces into the physical world, forces that I had unknowingly welcomed into my life. I hadn't just marked my skin with ink. I had opened doors, and now I was paying the price. But as I continued to research, something else caught my attention. Beneath the layers of ink, hidden in the designs I had once thought meaningless, there were symbols of protection, Symbols I didn't even remember choosing. A small triangle near my collarbone, barely visible to the naked eye, matched an ancient Christian sigil, a shield, a divine protection. It was a sign that, even in the darkest moments, I was not completely alone. I didn't understand it, but I felt it. I had been marked for a purpose. But it wasn't just a purpose for myself. I wasn't just fighting for my own soul. This battle was bigger than that. The days began to blend together in a haze. I struggled to find peace in the physical world, but every time I closed my eyes, the darkness would return. The shadows would close in, and I would find myself back in that desert, surrounded by those figures, their hollow eyes watching me. But each time, the light grew brighter. Each time, I felt a little stronger. One night, after another fitful sleep, I woke with a sense of urgency. I couldn't keep ignoring this. I had to act. I had to confront the darkness, once and for all. I called Marcus. I hadn't spoken to him in years, since high school, when he had always tried to drag me to church events, try to talk to me about faith. I had always laughed it off, dismissed it as nonsense. But now I needed him. When he answered, his voice was warm but cautious. "Hey man, it's been a while." I didn't waste time. "Marcus, I need your help. Something's happening. It's not normal." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could feel his hesitation, but then he said the words I needed to hear. "Talk to me." And so I did. I told him everything about the heart attack, the out-of-body experience, the visions, the voices, and the marks on my skin. I told him how I had felt something dark, something I couldn't explain, following me. The fear in my voice was undeniable, but Marcus didn't judge me. He didn't call me crazy. "I believe you," he said, his voice steady. "I've seen things like this before. Not to this level. But you're not crazy. This is real." Relief flooded through me, but it was quickly replaced by fear. "What do I do?" "We need to pray over you," Marcus said. "We need to break whatever ties these marks have created." That night, Marcus came over, bringing only his Bible and a small vial of anointing oil. It wasn't some grand ritual, no chanting or incantations. It was quiet, simple, but powerful. As he prayed, something strange began to happen. The air grew heavier. The shadows in the room seemed to pulse, growing darker with each word of scripture he spoke. I felt a force pulling away from me, an invisible weight lifting from my chest. The burning under my skin eased, like chains breaking one by one. But it wasn't over. The temperature in the room dropped sharply, and the lights flickered. The shadows surged forward, twisting violently, but Marcus didn't stop. "In the name of Jesus Christ," he commanded, "I break every claim you have on him. Leave now." The shadows recoiled, shrinking back, but they didn't disappear. They hovered, waiting. I felt the weight lift, but it wasn't complete. Not yet, but I knew something had changed. I had taken the first step, and now I understood. This battle, this war for my soul, it wasn't just mine to fight. It was a fight for everyone. I had unknowingly opened doors to something far darker than I could have imagined, but now I had a responsibility to close those doors and to help others do the same. The battle within me was far from over. Even after Marcus's prayer, even after the darkness had receded, I could still feel the shadows lingering just beyond my reach, waiting for me to falter. But something had shifted in me. I wasn't the same person I had been when I walked into that tattoo shop all those years ago. I had been marked, and now I understood that this marking wasn't a curse. It was a call to action. I wasn't fighting for just myself anymore. I was fighting for others, for anyone who had unknowingly opened the doors to darkness, anyone who had been marked without understanding the consequences. I knew now that I couldn't stay silent. My journey wasn't just about overcoming the shadows that had followed me. It was about helping others break free from their own invisible chains. I spent hours in prayer and reflection, searching for strength, for answers, for the courage to stand firm in the face of the unknown. And slowly, I began to see the truth more clearly. The battle was real, but so was the victory that awaited those who chose to stand in the light. The marks on my body were not just signs of rebellion. They were symbols of my past, my mistakes, my brokenness. but they were also symbols of something more. They were reminders that no matter how far I had fallen, no matter how dark the road had become, there was always a path back, and that path was lit by faith. I began to share my story more openly, not out of fear, but out of desire to help others who might be facing the same darkness. I reached out to those who had shared similar experiences, those who had felt the weight of their past, who had carried burdens they didn't understand. Together, we prayed. We supported each other. We helped each other reclaim what had been taken from us. But the more I spoke out, the more I realized how deep the problem ran. This wasn't just about tattoos or symbols. It was about choices. Choices that seemed small at the time but had spiritual consequences we couldn't always see. I had unknowingly connected myself to something far greater than I could have ever imagined. But now, with the strength I had found in my faith, I knew that I wasn't alone in this fight. One evening, after yet another session of prayer and reflection, I received a message from someone who had been watching my journey unfold. They had shared their own story, a story of struggle, of battling demons they didn't understand. But they also shared their hope, the hope that maybe, just maybe, they weren't alone. They weren't the only ones who had opened a door to something darker, and they weren't the only ones seeking a way out. And that was when it hit me. This wasn't just my battle anymore. This was a movement, a community of people who were waking up to the truth, a community of people who were no longer content to live in the shadows, who were no longer willing to let the darkness control their lives. We were stronger together, each of us carrying our own story, our own scars, but united in our fight for freedom, for peace, and for the truth. The fight was not over. It would never be over. But now, I knew I wasn't alone, and neither are you. If this story resonates with you, if it speaks to something deep inside, I want to invite you to be a part of our community. Take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're not doing this for money. We do it because we believe in the power of sharing these stories and connecting with others who are on the same journey. Your support means everything to us, and a like or subscription would be a huge help in spreading this message of hope and healing. Join our community, and let's continue this journey together. The strength of this movement lies in each of us, and together, we can overcome any. The days continue to pass in a blur, each one feeling like an echo of the last, but with something different. A subtle shift that I couldn't quite explain, but could feel with every step I took. It was as if the weight of the journey had settled into my bones, and I wasn't sure whether it was from the burden of the battle or the growing strength within me. But I knew this much. I was no longer the person I had once been. I had faced the darkness. I had felt its weight, its cold presence, as it clawed at my soul. I had been marked in ways I hadn't understood, marked by my choices, by the symbols I had worn, by the very skin that had once been an expression of rebellion. But now, I understood that the marks I carried were more than just a record of my past. They were a map, a guide to the greater purpose I had yet to fully realize. As I continued this journey, I began to see the truth more clearly. It wasn't just about me. It wasn't just about my past mistakes or the doors I had opened without realizing it. It was about all of us, all of those who had unknowingly walked into darkness, all of us who had opened doors to forces we didn't understand. But now, we had the power to close those doors. We had the strength to choose a different path. I had walked through fire. I had faced the things that terrified me, the things I had tried to bury deep inside. But I had also found something far more powerful than I had ever imagined: faith, community, and the unwavering light of truth. And I wasn't going to let the darkness take that from me again. There were still battles ahead. I knew that the enemy doesn't give up easily, but I had something stronger now. I had the support of those who had come alongside me, those who shared their stories, their pain, their hope. We were not alone in this fight, and together we would stand. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be moments of doubt, of fear, of uncertainty. But I knew now that there was a way forward, a way to heal, to reclaim what had been lost, and to walk in the light, not in fear. And no matter what, I would never walk that road alone. If this story has touched you, if it resonates with something deep within, I want to invite you to continue this journey with us. There's so much more to uncover, and the next video will be even more revealing. It could change your life. Just click the video that's appearing on your screen right now And let's continue this path together. Before you go, take a moment to give this video a like and leave a comment with the word Amen. By doing so, you're opening yourself to continued blessings, and your support helps us keep this movement growing. We're not just viewers, we're a community. And together, we'll stand strong, no matter what comes.